Oh my word. Seriously. Can ESPN stop scheduling these freaking basketball games when we're trying to get down to business with college football? It's so freaking annoying. Stop scheduling these damn basketball games just to try to get some ratings so people tune into the college football rankings show and got to watch the last 25 minutes of your damn basketball games. So annoying. ESPN, be better. All right. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here. I know it doesn't sound like it, but I appreciate you being here. So thanks for being here for the college football rankings. Should we use the word? No. I'm not going to jinx it. I don't believe in jinxes, of course. No reasonable human being does. But, just play along. I'm not going to say that word, that begins with an O and ends with an E. Let's see what we got here. Maybe I'll call some. I will be your online Jay Billis. 68-61 Memphis over Michigan State. 47.9 seconds left in the game. This will be my first college basketball viewing in, well, that's not completely true. I basically stopped watching about 10 or 12 years ago, about 2012, 2011, somewhere in that range. I just lost interest. But I have seen random NCAA games like 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there. Because obviously I watched this my whole life. But yes, we got 67. And of course, there's got to be like 18 timeouts. Like I remember, this brings back memories at the worldwide leader, just the agonizing end of these college basketball games where the last 48 seconds take 18 minutes to play because there's 18 timeouts and there's TV timeouts and there's this and that and stoppage of play and everybody gets fouled 84 times. And that's why maybe nobody watches the sport anymore. All right. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And I do think that this is going to be a fun rankings reveal, if there is such a thing. Let's not overstate it. Let's not become too enamored with it. But as rankings reveals go, I would say this would be a fun one because, again, Indiana, number 5 in the country, they lose. Depending on your perspective, did they get blown out? Did they make it a game? Were they competitive? We could survey all of you and you would have different perspectives. Some consider that a blowout. Others say they were competitive. It was somewhere in between. And then, of course, we've got the SEC teams that all lost. The bubble teams, I'll call them the bubble teams in the true spirit of college basketball. The 3 SEC bubble teams, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M, of course, went down last weekend. But they were buffeted by the Big 12 teams that didn't take advantage and win. Colorado and BYU. They lost those games, of course. And then you've got the situation in the ACC where maybe there's a door that's been opened to Clemson and or SMU to sneak into the college football playoff based on these teams in the SEC losing. All right. I will take your calls as we await. Let's see. We've been on for 6 minutes, and there has been all of 13 seconds played of college basketball in 6 minutes. That's exactly what I'm talking about. All right. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. We've got Rob on the line.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I am doing just fine. How are you?
Minus the the wait for this stupid basketball game to be over, right?
Exactly. I know I sound a little harsh. I've watched tons of college basketball and enjoyed it in my day, just not in the last dozen years. But yeah, it's a programming ploy to get more people to watch their basketball game.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm the same way. I used to love college basketball when I was much younger, like in my 20s, teens, 20s, that kind of thing. No longer really into it for some reason. I don't know why, but
yeah,
anyway.
I'm the same way. I didn't make a choice. Like I didn't take a stand to say, oh, I have better things to do with my life, or I don't agree with some political stand, or I didn't make any principled stand against college basketball. I just lost interest in it. It bores me.
Right. So I just wanted to make a few points here. I've seen some, although I think most people from pundits and just fans that I've seen and talked to, they are in favor of the expanded playoff. and I am certainly one of those people. I love it. I think it's great for the sport. It's not perfect, right? There's some kinks that probably need to be worked out here and
Yes.
there. But if in my opinion, one thing I'll always say to the detractors is this: why should we praise the NFL playoffs, which has a significantly larger amount of spots open in relation to the amount of teams available, when college football only has now 12 spots for 134 FBS teams? That's a really small group of potential spots to play in for the national championship. I'm not saying we need to expand it further, although I know it's going to be. I think probably 14 to 16 teams is on the schedule, is on the horizon pretty soon. I just think 12 team playoffs has made this season so much more enjoyable, in my opinion. I don't know who it was. I don't know if you said it or somebody, but I was of the same opinion. Like, I was watching that Arizona State BYU game with glee. I mean, that was a fun game to watch, and it had stakes in a season where it wouldn't have had stakes otherwise. I mean, it would have had some stakes for the Big 12 title, but not for the playoff, potentially. So, I mean, there's a lot of games like that. I mean, I find that I'm watching more football, more college football, more teams at this point in the season, and being more excited about it. The Texas versus Texas A&M tickets. Have you heard the prices on those?
Well, it's in Texas, so I can only imagine.
It's like we're talking about thousands of dollars, multiple thousands of dollars for tickets to get to that game now. Obviously, it's been like 13 years since they played last, and the stakes are huge. And I mean, this is the kind of thing that I love about this college football playoff. Like I said, it's not perfect, but in my opinion, it's so much better than having a 4-team invitational. In my opinion, anyways.
I
What are your
love the
thoughts on
Texas
it?
A&M situation too. I love that situation because I always love to try to figure out what team is the lowest in the rankings that has a reasonable path. And then usually, well, when there was a 14 playoff, it was much different, of course, but then there would always be a highly ranked team that really couldn't budge. They just couldn't elevate. You might have, in the old format with the 14 playoff, have a team at number 7 going into the final weekend, and they really had just no way to get there. But you had a team at like number 17 that had some kind of like path to get there, and that's how it is in a sense. Now with the 12 team, the options, the variables are exponentially more. But Texas A&M, they were number 15 last week. I am projecting they fall to number 19 in these rankings, but they're playing Texas to go to the SEC championship game. So they will either lose and be 8-4 and barely in the rankings, and then of course nobody cares where they are in the rankings, or they have a path. They have the clearest path to get an automatic bid as the, let's say, number 19 team in the country right now. That's interesting to me. Not that they're going to pull it off, but they have the opportunity. And then in the Big 12, just these 10-2 teams in the Big 12 and how they're going to be evaluated against the 9-3 teams in the SEC. If they in fact do become 9-3 teams, because Alabama's got to beat Auburn and Tennessee's got to beat Vandy, and Ole Miss has to win their game against Mississippi State, which we all think are givens, but the season has shown us that there aren't givens. And then Clemson has kind of played its way back into it, beating a lot of bad teams to get to 9-2. They got the 10-2 opportunity, of course, playing South Carolina. And that's an elimination game. Not that the winner is going to be in for sure, but it's definitely an elimination game between Clemson and South Carolina. So that's interesting. And SMU could go and they could play in the ACC championship game, and even with like a really close loss, possibly get in, or Miami with a really close loss, either one of those at 11-2. I guess Miami would be the better option since they're the higher ranked team. So if they lose to SMU, do they still get to the playoff? It's really interesting.
Yeah, I'm loving it. There's also this narrative that I find it's funny. I talked about this like a week or two ago, but I'm no Penn State fan at all. Obviously, I'm a Notre Dame fan, but I don't dislike Penn State. I have nothing against them necessarily. But I see a lot of people here and there saying, "Oh, Penn State's overrated. They don't deserve to be." It's like, well, okay, they have one loss, and their loss is against the second best, potentially first best team in the country. You know, definitely a top 3 team in the country. So if their only loss is to a top 3 team in the country, and it was a competitive game, why are they getting like? Yeah, they had close games against Minnesota. Minnesota's not a bad team. Like Minnesota's a decent team. Like they can run. They're physical. They run the ball well. Like I just see all these takes like, oh, Penn State is trash. They're overrated. They don't deserve to be in the top 12. Well, who does then? They've got one loss to Ohio State. Who's taken Penn State's spot? A 2-loss Big 12 team? A 3-loss SEC team? I don't understand.
Yeah, I think we get confused, or college football fans get confused between what's going on this season and what's going on in past seasons. So with Penn State, there's a stigma that, okay, this year's Penn State is the same as the other year's Penn States, which they might be. That remains to be seen. But we have to evaluate these teams based on this season, not, oh, it's the same old Penn State. They're a good team, but they're not a great team, and they're going to lose to anybody elite. So hold them down. Well, this is a different team, different year. And I'm not saying that won't come to roost, that won't come to fruition, but we have to at least allow it to. So we can only evaluate these teams based on what we see this season.
Yeah, and Tyler Warren is a stud. They need to use him more. Like the fact that their play calling didn't involve him at all on that goal line, attempt in that Ohio State game is baffling. I'll never understand that. Like, look, give the ball to your best player at some point on a drive, right? You would think, especially if you're Penn State and you're having trouble. Like, anyway, that's a moot point. But anyways, I'm gonna let you go. I know you probably got a million callers looking forward to these rankings. Always good talking to you, Mark.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate the call.
Yep.
Let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. Understanding to our next couple callers that I may interrupt you to read the rankings as they're being revealed, which I believe is going to happen right now. Here we go. Colorado's number 25. I wish I had my rankings in front of us. I'll have to get those in just a second. We've got Kansas State at 24. There's going to be a ton of Big 12 teams here in the bottom of the rankings. So Colorado fell to 8-3 with their loss. Kansas State's 8-3. They're at number 24. Illinois at number 23. They are 8-3 as well. And then we've got, I would love to see this against what I predicted. UNLV is number 22. Then we've got waiting. Missouri's number 21. So a lot of 8-3 teams. So they're telling us that Missouri's got the best resume out of those teams, and that UNLV's got a better resume than those other teams. Really? Okay. Texas A&M's number 20. I remember I picked them at number 19. So I was off by 1. Texas A&M fell from 15 to 20 based on the loss in overtime against Auburn. Imagine if Texas A&M would have won that game starting at 15 last weekend, they'd probably be 10 or 11, but they did not get the job done. BYU fell from 14 to 19. Then we've got, I'm not even going to try to predict here, Iowa State at 18. These are very close to what I predicted. I'll have to get that out and see. That's the first time I've ever tried to predict what the playoff rankings would be. Oh, man, the Big 12 is all over the place. The Big 12 is number 18, 19, and about 3 spots after that. Tulane at number 17. Look at that. So Tulane is higher ranked than all the Big 12 teams, excluding one, and that one is Arizona State. If there is a loss out of the Big 12 champion, meaning the Big 12 team that eventually wins the championship next weekend loses this weekend, And Tulane, oh my goodness, you got Tulane and you got Boise State. Interesting. Not that Tulane's going to make a run without Boise State faltering. There's South Carolina at number 15. They moved up 3 spots. I think my projections were pretty close. I did have South Carolina at 15. And of course, there's a big groundswell out there for South Carolina to make the college football playoff. But at 15, win over Clemson. Oh, they've got some space to do that. Ole Miss, of course, defeated South Carolina by 24 points. They're at 14. I had Ole Miss at 12. I do remember that. I had Ole Miss at 12 and Bama 11. So we're going to see Bama here. So consider last week that Bama was 7 and Ole Miss 9. So that was the separation they saw between those two 8-2 SEC teams. And then Bama lost to a worse team, of course, and got blown out by more. There's Alabama at whatever that is, 13. So Bama's at 13. I picked them at 11. And now we got to see some highlights of Jalen Milroe. Their FPI is number 4 in the country. I had some clown on the USC show last night in the chat, just trumpeting the FPI, and that I didn't know what I was talking about because I said USC was just a decent team, marginal team, but they are actually one of the 20 best teams in the country because the FPI says so. Even though they lost 5 games to the likes of Minnesota, Maryland, and others. There we've got Clemson at 12. I don't have Clemson that high. So Clemson has a better resume than Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina. Really, do they? Clemson has a better resume than Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina. Somebody would have to sell me on that one. And none of these people, I'm not calling anyone names tonight, none of these people on the College Football Playoff Committee, I guarantee, would be able to convince me or be able to out-debate me that Clemson has a better resume than Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina. Clemson's best win is Pitt. All right, there we've got SMU or Boise State's at 11. Okay, Boise State's coming off an awful showing against Wyoming. Their strength of schedule is 81st. Their FPI rank is 27th. All right. Yes, we see Ashton Jeanty running for touchdowns, and against Boise State has really had kind of a lackluster run over the last few weeks. All right, let's get to the top 10. Understanding that these 12 would make the playoff. And so these playoff rankings are telling us that Clemson will make the playoffs if they win. Well, we'd have to figure out a few other things with the Big 12. Hang on. Indiana at 10. They fell 5 spots. I had them dropping to 9. SMU's number 9. They were number 13 last week. They are number 9. So SMU has a better resume than Indiana. SMU lost to BYU by a field goal. Indiana lost to Ohio State by 3 scores. And there's more to it than that, but still, strength of schedule, 77th. I would like to see Indiana's strength of schedule. Where does that stand right now? All right, SMU at number 9. Let's go. We've got to have Miami coming up. No, it's Tennessee, then Miami. So Tennessee at 8. Miami's at 7. So Tennessee was really the biggest winner last weekend. Certainly up there. They got those other SEC teams out of the way. 3 of them out of the way for Tennessee to jump up to number 8 in the rankings. And now we should have Miami. I forget about Georgia. Georgia at 7. Miami's up to number 6. Miami and its Wake Forest victory gets up to number 6 in the country. Yeah. I think I've got Miami at 8. There's Georgia. They moved up 3 spots, and they've got Georgia Tech this weekend. And now we're going to see either Notre Dame or Miami. There's Miami at 6. So we've got Notre Dame at 5. So they're taking advantage of the Indiana loss and the other SEC teams that lost. So Notre Dame's going to be at 5. Penn State 4, Texas 3, Ohio State 2, and Oregon 1. All right, let's take your calls because we know what the rankings look like right now. Now that we've got Miami in the 6th spot, and again, Notre Dame should be at number 5. Here we go. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Michael, how are you?
Mark, good. Yourself?
I am doing just fine.
How awesome is it when great minds think alike?
Great minds. Well, I don't know. You'll have to tell me how that works out because I
had IU 9th also. I would have had IU 9th also.
Okay.
But my thing is, and I'm sure you can be.
I don't know what that says about you or the playoff committee, but go ahead.
I'm sure you've been following through these little spat we've been having, me and Adam been having and stuff like that.
No, I have not.
Oh, I mean, it's all fun, of course. Adam, I love you. You're a good person, though. But anyway, why is it he thinks some teams shouldn't be in there? But can you really blame a team for their schedules?
Yes, you can blame. Okay. There's a difference here. Let's break this down into three different categories here in terms of schedules. Number 1, you cannot blame a team for their conference schedule. They had no impact on that. They had no decision making. They were given their conference schedule. No, you cannot blame a team for their conference schedule. You still have to evaluate their conference schedule. So just because they didn't play anyone, we can't say, oh, Indiana's trying to run from the best teams in the Big Ten. No, they have nothing to. Like, I've actually fielded calls and comments from people through the years that have commented on whatever team running from and being scared of other teams in their conference and not playing them. That's utterly ridiculous and absurd. That doesn't happen. The league office formulates a scheduling format and implements it, and the teams in the conference have nothing to do with it. We can blame teams for their out-of-conference schedule.
Exactly.
Okay?
And we've been through this with IU plenty of times.
And then we also need to distinguish. There's a difference between blaming a team for having a bad schedule or a good schedule, great schedule, whatever it is, and then also evaluating against that schedule. Because pick your team that scheduled somebody in the non-conference schedule that should be really good, but turned out not to be good. Well, I'm not blaming them. It's not their fault. They can't see into the future, but we're still not going to evaluate if somebody scheduled, if LSU was vying for a playoff spot and they scheduled USC in non-conference play, I wouldn't blame LSU. I'd say, well, they scheduled USC and UCLA. I would give LSU all sorts of credit for intent, but if both of those teams turned out to be lousy teams, you can't rate their schedule or evaluate their schedule like they're playing one of Pete Carroll's USC teams. You evaluate that they're playing a mediocre USC team.
Yeah, and that's like what I was trying to say with that. You can't blame how your opponents are going to play. And he's saying
but you still evaluate.
Yeah, he's saying South Carolina should be in. Okay, Illinois, they're also in 3. They've had, they got smoked by Oregon, which was expected. But if I'm not mistaken, wasn't that a close game with Penn State for like 3.5 quarters?
Yes.
Okay, why should Illinois? He's saying South Carolina should be in. Why should Illinois not be in?
Well, I'd have to go through it. I'd have to go through it game by game, but I would say that Illinois' strength of schedule doesn't compare to South Carolina's, but I get your point because we get in trains of thought. But yeah, Illinois is an 8-3 football team that should win this weekend and be 9-3 in the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
And they got blown out by Oregon. They hung with Penn State, and they lost a close game against Minnesota.
Yeah.
South Carolina lost by 2 to Alabama. They got blown out by Ole Miss, and they lost to
who was it?
Forgetting.
You're gonna make me do some work, Mark.
Well,
hang on.
I'll figure it out in about 3 seconds. It's somebody else in the SEC. They lost to Alabama, Ole Miss, LSU. Yes.
Yeah. But no,
So the three teams that Illinois lost to are better than the 3 teams that South Carolina lost to.
Exactly.
But South Carolina played better in those 3 games.
Well, they didn't really play better in the because you can take the Oregon game with Illinois and the Ole Miss game with
Good point, Michael. That's a good point.
All right. I wish we could do this all night, sir, because all-nighters used to be fun, especially when we was in college. But I got to ask you this. Was you in Mississippi back in 1996 when Mississippi State made a run to the Final Four?
Yes, I was.
I was just asking because I know how you was complaining about the basketball and stuff, so.
Oh, I'm just making fun of basketball. Yes, I covered basketball for years and years and years. I could play you a video off of YouTube. I'll look it up and I will show you a video of me at the Final Four in 1996.
Yeah, and I think wasn't it Kentucky that beat him, or was it Syracuse that beat him?
Syracuse.
Was it? So you made the trip to Indian, the old Hoosier Dome back in '96 then?
I made a trip to the Hoosier Dome, to New Orleans, the Superdome for the SEC Championship, to Lexington for the regional finals, and to the Final Four in East Rutherford.
Yep, not bad. I wonder what Eric Dampier is doing these days anyway, or some of the former players.
I don't know. I think we're veering way off. Here.
I know.
Nobody cares about Eric Dampier. I'm guessing that less than half the people watching know anything about Eric Dampier.
Sure.
Big number.
Okay, I'm going to be getting your book soon, probably this week and early next week. But there's some things I got to talk to you about with logistics and stuff. So. All
right, Michael.
Since they're prohibiting you from going on a book tour, which I think is bogus, but that's just me.
What do you want?
A book tour.
A book tour?
Yes. You know how they do it for new authors?
Oh, absolutely. I know that, but I'm not necessarily a highly known popular author that could go to the Barnes & Noble in the middle of, I don't know, Topeka, Kansas, and sit there and sell books. I'd be sitting there like twiddling my thumbs for hours.
Let's just hit the New York bestsellers list. I don't know, Mark. All right, man. I'm going to let you go because I know you got gazillion callers. But there is one time I hope me and Adam can debate during the stream or something. All right. Take care. Enjoy the rest of the night. And happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
Okay, Michael. You and Adam can have my stream at some point to debate.
All right. Thanks, man. Take care.
All right. Let's keep it rolling. Here at the Voice of College Football, we got our buddy Minnesota Dave, whose Gophers are not quite up to the top 25.
Well, we have a couple of close losses that could have made us maybe in the top 25, but not this year.
Your team is 6-5. Yeah, you would need 2 more wins.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I wasn't expecting that, Don't lose to North Carolina. Don't have a squeaker against Michigan. And, have a close one against Penn State. That's the reason why you're not here. Oh, well.
Yeah, that was a good ball game on Saturday night. Yeah, Minnesota's a good football team. They've acquitted themselves very well this season. I would say that their early season losses, North Carolina, their worst game was against Iowa.
Yeah.
I'd like to see them play Iowa again. They could win that game.
Don't tell Erica that.
Oh, I know. It's PJ Fleck. There's no way that he could win a game against Iowa, but I got to tell you that Minnesota's looked like a better team than Iowa over the last 6 or 7 weeks.
And I can't believe that Vegas picked Wisconsin over Minnesota. It's not huge. It's only 2 points. but I think I would have picked Minnesota.
Yes, Wisconsin's a mess.
Yeah, well, let's not talk about. We have all time to talk about the Gophers for the week. Let's just talk about the college football playoffs. Reason why I
Yes.
called. I am absolutely surprised on some of these selections. I am getting sick of the SEC bias. What does it take for Bama to be knocked out? What is it going to take for Missouri to be knocked out? You know, the only team I feel that can be a 9-3 team that's worthy is Georgia. And I don't think Georgia would even make it if they lose to Georgia Tech.
Okay, so I'm not quite following you here, Dave. So I understand that those teams that you just mentioned are not having banner seasons. However, when you're are you talking about being knocked completely out of the rankings or out of the top 12?
At least, well, I would have to say Missouri should have been knocked out of the top 25. I think Bama should have been at least in the 20s. I don't think they're that good. And
ranked ahead of
Georgia is
Bama.
the only team that I feel.
These are still the old rankings. We got to wait for ESPN to get us the updated rankings. Like, I understand this, and I feel these questions and these comments, and I see them coming in on my videos all the time. But you got to, like, people just say, "Oh, Alabama, they suck. They lost this and lost that. They need to be knocked down." And Ole Miss, they just lost. They need to be knocked down. And replaced with who?
I don't think they should be knocked out, but at least they should be at least in the top 20 for Bama.
And replaced by who?
Anybody is better than Bama right now.
Minnesota?
No, God.
Anybody.
Well, I mean.
I get the criticism that these teams aren't playing excellent football, but once you get past like the 5 or 6 top teams in the country, these teams don't have very good records and very good resumes. And like, if you compare Alabama, South Carolina, Ole Miss's resumes as 8-3 teams against 9-2 resumes from Clemson, like, I think actually Alabama and Ole Miss are getting ripped off being ranked behind Clemson. I think that that's a complete travesty and a joke.
I agree.
Clemson's schedule's been pathetic.
I agree.
They're 9-2, and their best win is against Pitt. That's their best win. And it's by far their best win.
Oh, I agree. I mean, it is amazing to me.
I guess what I'm saying, Dave, is it's almost like the old NCAA basketball situation when the teams are selected and there's all these bubble teams that are left out, and you hear all these people saying they should be in, they should be in, they should be in. Okay, well, who are you replacing? So it's the same thing here. I get your point. Alabama was horrible last week. They lost to a mediocre team by 3 touchdowns.
Oh, but yeah. Not even mediocre. Like, I think Oklahoma is just awful.
I don't know about that. I think Oklahoma would probably be pretty competitive in the Big Ten. Oklahoma's got an excellent defense. Like, I think people are way skewed on Oklahoma. Like, I don't think people really watch Oklahoma play or know their personnel. They have one of the 10 best defenses in the country. And I've been saying that since the season started.
And that's true, Mark. I mean, in some ways, I don't follow Oklahoma football. I just look at Oklahoma being the Oklahoma of old, that I'm always expecting that they should be always in, like, at least in the top 15 or a top 10.
They're not that. No, I'm not promoting them to be like ranked or that they're that good. I'm not saying, but I'm just saying a win against Oklahoma should not be discounted. I don't think a win against Wisconsin or Michigan should be discounted. I think there's some value to it. And I would put Oklahoma and Michigan pretty much neck and neck. And Minnesota. I think all those teams are I think, shoot, Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan, USC, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Florida.
How about Auburn? Would you put Auburn up there?
Auburn. They really played well this past. That's really the first game that they played this year that's worth a damn.
Yeah,
the rest
I
of
mean
those
they
teams,
did
toss
they
them up
did
in
lose
the
to
air.
Cal, and Cal's
Who knows?
average at best.
All the teams I just mentioned, I have no idea who would win games. And anybody who says that they know who would win games between those teams, because as soon as Michigan would beat Oklahoma, if they played 2 weeks later, Oklahoma would beat Michigan. Those teams are extremely close. Throw in Washington, throw in Louisville.
Yeah, it's just hard to replace Indiana. I mean, that's the one thing. I mean, like I said, Indiana needs to write Christmas cards to freaking Oklahoma, Auburn, Florida, and I would say Kansas and Arizona State. Because they're if those teams ended up winning, there's no way that I would say they would drop down to probably like 17th, 18th, maybe 20th in the college football playoffs poll. Indiana just, like what we said before, their non-conference schedule was so bad.
Yeah.
They have to try to find a way next year to improve that. You at least have to have at least one Power 4 school to go against, not just a bunch of. I think who did they play? Did they play only one P5 school? Was it?
Yeah, it's really not worth talking about. They played Charlotte, FIU, and somebody else. It's not even worth discussing who they played. Next year,
they were planning to go to a bowl game.
You ready for this?
That's the reason why they did that.
Minnesota Dave. Indiana next year is playing, get this, out of conference. Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, and Indiana State.
That's an absolute joke.
It is.
That's pathetic. Indiana State's not even a very good bowl subdivision team anymore.
Nope. No, that's a pathetic schedule.
Yeah, gosh. Yeah, at least the Gophers, I know, at least play at least one team next year that's worthy, and that's Cal. At Cal.
Even if you are expecting to be the worst team in Power 5, you should be scheduling somebody.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, Mark. A bit, we have to remember that sometimes these schedules get put in way too early in advance.
Well,
these are like 6 years or 7 years.
My response to that, though, Dave, is regardless of when that was scheduled, we know that those teams are going to suck. So that's not even an excuse.
Yeah. Yeah.
They could have scheduled those teams 3 years ago, 18 years ago, 400 years ago, and we know that they suck, and they will always suck, and they always have sucked. So it's not like they scheduled Louisville and then caught them on a bad year.
Yeah, I remember back in the days when the Gophers used to schedule just these, barely, barely in the MAC or like Division I AA schools, just because they had to try, had to at least try to build up their confidence to go bowling. But that was like way back in the early years of like Mason, the end of Brewster, and like
Minnesota Dave, I really don't think that the 120 people that are watching care about Minnesota's 1975 coaches. So anything else tonight, Dave?
Nothing else, Mark. Just wanted to talk a little college football.
Well, I appreciate the call, Dave.
All right.
Have a good night. Our show tonight, if he's still watching, is being presented by Falconer X. So Falconer X has, yes, he has sponsored our show tonight. Super sticker. Thank you, Falconer. So basically, by me putting this on the Miami channel, I have earned $2, $5, $8 tonight. Now you know how I get so wealthy doing this. This is firsthand evidence right here. This is how I make the millions that I have in the bank. Thank you, Falconer TRX. He has sponsored us for $8 tonight. Thank you so much for your contribution, sir, for keeping us going here at the Voice of College Football. All right. We got to Real MVP. I think we're going to put everyone on a timer on that note. The Real MVP, what's going on tonight?
Oh, nothing much. How about you, Mark?
Oh, I'm doing just fine. What's up?
Oh, there's a few, I believe, travesties in the ranking. Clemson being 12.
Yes.
How do you explain it?
Yep.
And then Boise State at 11. I'm sorry, but Boise State can't even beat just horrendous, awful teams anymore. I gave them multiple passes because of the way they play against Oregon. But when you struggle against Nevada, when you struggle against San Jose State, when you struggle against Wyoming, you need to be dropped and not rewarded. Like, in my opinion, Tulane has a legitimate case of being a better football team right now and overall than Boise State. I know Boise State only lost to Oregon by 3 at the very beginning of the year, but at some point, all these other games need to start mattering as well that Boise State is just barely skating by against.
Yes, I don't necessarily disagree with that.
I got you, Mark. And why is the committee putting all the SEC teams in just one giant clump? That's all they've been doing throughout this entire rankings. Is this just like intellectual laziness? Because I don't see them parsing through the SEC. I don't believe they're parsing through the SEC teams and saying this SEC team is better, clearly better. This SEC team is clearly worse. They just have all the same losses, and they're like, well, they're all together.
Yeah. I have taken note of that many times and talked about that. And I would agree with you that basically, yeah, they're not dissecting. So we know that their competition, when we talk Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, we know that their competition is similar. We know that their schedules within the conference are somewhat similar. But once you start to factor in the 1 or 2 difficult non-conference opponents that they've played, that they've all gone out and done their best to schedule somebody, but obviously that somebody is different when it's Georgia playing Clemson versus Alabama playing Wisconsin versus Ole Miss playing Wake Forest. That's their out-of-conference game. So those are very different games, very different teams. And then even within the very like SEC schedules, the nuance of the games and the game control and how well they've played their performance. Yes, they have taken the lazy route and they don't want to take a stand. So they basically have tried to side with whoever has played better more recently. And then they've also sided with whoever has had a more collection of wins within them. But obviously we know that the scenario has been Tennessee beat Alabama, Alabama beat Georgia, Georgia beat Tennessee, Ole Miss beat Georgia. And so they've just, they have clumped them together. And now they've got some separation, of course, with the 2 9-2 teams versus the 3 8-3 teams, if you include Texas A&M. So they've had some kind of forced separation. But before that, they're just putting them together. They're doing the same thing with the Big 12 teams. Colorado, Kansas State, Iowa State, they're all in a row. So is BYU. I think there are 4 in a row.
No, I've put Iowa State and BYU's 18-19 and Kansas State, Colorado's 24-25.
Okay, 18-19, 24-25. They'd have to explain. Oh, well, that's 9-2, 9-2, 8-3, 8-3. That's where they're going there. So yeah.
Yeah, it's just a laziness. I put the rankings in the chat for you, Mark, by the way, if you want to bring them up, because I know you like having the visual graphic.
Yes, they still have not updated on ESPN.
Well, the committee does it almost immediately, which is great. The actual committee website they have, and that's why I always go to them. But I see a scenario, Mark. If Indiana plays close against Purdue, how far do you think they'll drop?
Should they drop?
Purdue.
I know they're terrible, but again, it all depends on what everyone else is doing. See, this is the problem with questions as such. What is everybody else doing? Just winning?
Yes, let's
everybody
say
wins. If everybody wins, and Indiana is currently number 10, and they would have beaten Purdue 24-21. And who's behind them? Of course, they're not going to surpass anyone in front of them if everybody takes care of business. So Boise State playing whoever they play this weekend, that's inconsequential. Clemson, South Carolina. No, still Clemson's resume is not strong enough just because they beat South Carolina as a 2-loss team to raise them above Indiana. And Indiana's still going to have an 11-1 record over Alabama 9-3, Ole Miss 9-3, South Carolina 9-3. They shouldn't budge anywhere. Where are they going to fall?
I think they're going to fall significantly.
What? If they play close against Purdue?
Yes.
And they're 11-1?
Yes.
And they're going to fall behind these 3-loss teams?
Yes.
No, that's
I think
insane.
the committee's going to do it.
If the committee does that, then I will. Oh, if they were headquartered somewhere, I would drive there and throw rocks through the windows, because that's just moronic. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't know why you necessarily think it's going to happen, but Alabama's not necessarily, they're not playing Georgia this weekend, or they're not playing Cam Newton's Auburn team. They're playing a bad Auburn, a very mediocre Auburn team. Ole Miss is playing a horrible Mississippi State team. So how do you elevate teams? It's not like Alabama's going out there and beating Georgia this weekend, and Ole Miss is beating a good LSU team or somebody of that ilk to elevate them. So I'm not getting your reasoning.
Well, it's brand bias, Mark. Brand bias.
Well, the brand bias, that should have been baked in earlier. It's not right now. We got Indiana at 10 and Alabama at 13. How in the world do they jump that many spots beating a 5-6 Auburn team?
Because the committee's going to say, well, look at Indiana. They had a tough game against Ohio State. They got blown out. Then the following week against the worst or second worst team in all of college football, they struggled to win by 3 points. We believe conclusively that Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina is just a better football team than Indiana. Okay. They're going to it's the path of least resistance, Mark.
I don't believe you're right on this. If you
I don't agree.
Right, and I know this isn't your opinion,
right, it's not my opinion.
You're just, yes, you are playing through the committee and you're anticipating their moves, but I don't think you're right in anticipating your moves. And if you are correct, then they're insane. They're insane if they're going to elevate those teams for two different reasons. Number one, it's not the right thing to do and it's not correct. Number two, if they were going to do it, they should have been much more nuanced than they have, than to just skyrocket an Alabama team and Ole Miss teams that beat lousy teams past an Indiana team. Yeah, Indiana just played a better game against maybe the best team in the country than Alabama did against about the 40th or 50th best team in the country.
And see, the hard part in doing this is I agree with everything you're saying. I just don't think the committee is going to take that much nuance into it.
Yeah, this is, again, you're getting my blood boil for one of the few times. That's very difficult to do because I keep a very even, my blood pressure is like very healthy status low. It's very low. But that starts to get my blood boiling just a little bit. And I don't care about Indiana. I could care less. I only care about justice and fairness And that would cause me to be very regretful that I do not have a large YouTube channel or impact, because it would cause me to want to shut down the channel. It's what it would cause me to want to do, rather than fuming to nobody.
I got you, Mark. I got you. But this is the type of thing that's going to happen when we've got these 12-team playoffs, is with these, they're going to find any way out to get the big brands the elevation that they need, in my opinion. And with Indiana's schedule this year, it's only in the 50s. It's going to fall back into the 60s. I'm just saying, Mark, it's not out of the question entirely. Another team I think is going to fall into the same line as SMU. I believe Miami can lose the ACC title game and make the playoffs still. I do not think that's the case for SMU. Do you think that's the case?
I don't, although I do find it interesting that, do you recall what these teams were ranked last week?
So they both just moved up one spot.
Okay, so here we go. We've got Miami at 6 and SMU at 9. You're telling me that they were 7 and 10 last week?
Hold on. Sorry. SMU was 13. Miami was 8. Sorry.
Okay.
I misremembered.
All right. So SMU was 13. They moved up 4 spots to 9 after beating Virginia to a pulp, 33-7. Miami beat a Wake Forest team 42-14, although it was close first half. Then they blew them out, and they went from 8-6.
Correct.
Okay. Now we've got Miami playing Syracuse and SMU playing Cal this weekend. And let's say they both just do what they're expected to do. They both win by 2 scores. Okay. So they stand pat at 6 and 9. So you're telling me that you believe Miami can lose to SMU and stay in the playoff seedings, and SMU would fall out. I think that you're accurate with that. I have them much closer, because if you really listen to this, for anybody that watches our Miami show on Wednesday night with Cam Underwood from State of the U, Cam does a remarkable job, great storyteller, just a great personality, does a great show with us. However, he's a biased Miami fan. He tries not to be, but he's extremely biased. He admitted last week, I didn't even drag this out of him. He said, you know what? I have to admit, SMU's got a better resume than we do. And I thought, wow. And if you really look at it, Miami lost to Georgia Tech. They're 7-4, soon to be 7-5. SMU lost to BYU, 9-2 team, just by 3 points. And SMU, they both beat Louisville by the same margin. And I just think if you comb through it past that, SMU has somewhat more of an impressive, just slightly. It's close, but Pitt's one of the better teams in the ACC, and SMU defeated them. Although Miami beat Florida, so maybe it's a really close call. They shouldn't be 3 spots apart, though.
Right, but Mark, it goes back to what I've been saying for about a year now. It's the brand. Miami's a big brand with a big fan base, and SMU is just nobody. They would belong in the island of misfit toys with the rest of the Big 12, and that's the differentiation between the two.
Ohio State played no one non-conference. Their schedule is almost as bad as Indiana's, so it really is inconsequential. So if Ohio State would have gotten Indiana's schedule,
they would have been number 1, number 2 in the country. Yeah,
they wouldn't have been 5 last week, and they wouldn't be 10 now. It's sad. It's really pathetic. The committee doesn't do its job.
Right. I'm surprised you didn't tell Steve Dace how, he's part of the elites with being a Michigan fan. Like, it's kind of weird. You all are part of the elites. Just oppressing on us little guys. Us Indianas, SMU's, Boise States of the world.
Why would I be pointing that out to Steve Dace in particular today?
Well, because his Michigan team is in an awkward spot where if Ohio State somehow lost to Michigan, I think there is an argument that they shouldn't be the 5 seed, but they will still be the 5 seed because Michigan's a big brand.
Yeah. Oh, I gotcha. Yeah. If Ohio State loses, they should not be the 5 seed. No.
But I
need
think they
to
still
drop.
will be.
Well, Oregon's going to be playing Penn State in the Big Ten championship game.
Right. But Ohio State beat Penn State. And I think the committee's going to take that head-to-head and say, well, we know Ohio State's better because they went to Penn State and controlled the game completely.
Yeah.
And I don't think Georgia's too far behind to move up to the 5 seed, so Ohio State would still be the 5 seed. Even though resume-wise, I don't think that should be the case at all.
Although Georgia's going to go to the SEC championship game probably. Or they are going to the SEC championship game. Yes.
So I think it's an interesting debate of who that 5 seed is, but I'm pretty sure Ohio State has it locked down as of right now. I think Oregon is the 1 seed, and Ohio State is the 5 seed, and then the winner of the SEC is the 2 seed. I don't see any world where that's not how it's going to shake out.
I think there's a world, but I think you are almost guaranteed of that. Yes.
Final thing I'll ask you about, Mark, is do you think the committee is going to keep doing this Boise State above the Big 12 for next week as well? Because every signal they've given out is the Big 12 is just a terrible, irrelevant conference. I mean, almost Tulane is ahead of the entire Big 12 now at 16 versus 17. So do you think it's almost locked in stone that Boise State's going to be ranked ahead of the Big 12?
Yeah, and it's really crazy that we're not talking about a 1 or 0 loss group of 5 team with Tulane. We're just talking about another 9-2 team. So let this sink in, everyone. Tulane's 9-2. They've got the same record as Iowa State and BYU. And they are ranked ahead of 2 Big 12 teams with the same record. Who's Tulane lost to? They lost to Kansas State, correct?
And Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. Yeah. Close games. But my goodness, to think that they are evaluating their wins to be better than Iowa State and BYU's. That's crazy.
Yeah, that might be the most. Like, they in game control wise, they seem more dominant than even Boise State, but they've just beaten nobody that's worth anything.
And they're ranking them ahead of Iowa State and BYU.
Right. Their best wins are going to be against Army in a few weeks, assuming they'll beat Army.
The worst case scenario here is if a team that loses this weekend, which is possible, in the Big 12 goes to the Big 12 championship game and loses. Or, I'm sorry, wins the Big 12 championship after losing this weekend. Right.
Well, Arizona State, Iowa State, the 2 highest teams, have the easiest path. If they win, they're in. And then BYU's the 3rd team, and Colorado needs like an insane amount of things to happen. I'm talking teams that I don't even think have a mathematical chance to make it. They need some of those teams to win and lose.
Sure.
Because of the silly tiebreakers.
All right, DeReal.
Yeah, it's good talking to you, Mark. And I'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right. We appreciate Rob's contribution here. Thank you so much for that. Hey, Mark. Appreciate your shows, insight, and discussion. Go Irish. Man, a lot of teams out there, a lot of fan bases rooting for USC this weekend, huh? Yes. All right.
The mood's on.
Adam checking in. Adam, how's it going?
Hey, Mark, how are you doing?
I am doing just fine. What's up?
I'm going to be only like 4 or 5 minutes. First, Michael and everyone else, it's always fun debating with you, and I appreciate the great discussion. It's a lot of fun. Mark, so how do I put this? You talked briefly about you were interested in fairness and justice. What do you mean by that?
I want to honor the teams that win games and perform well against good competition.
Okay. Do you think that your viewpoint is superior to others who may define it differently?
Well, I think innately most people do believe their viewpoint to be superior. Otherwise, they wouldn't have that viewpoint. If I had a different, if I have the viewpoint I have, not based on some kind of principled position, but because I think it's the best viewpoint. That doesn't mean it's objectively the best viewpoint. That means that otherwise I would choose a different viewpoint if I thought it was a superior viewpoint.
I think your viewpoint is certainly, I mean, in my view, very reasonable. And applying that viewpoint, I would like to know and be educated on why a Penn State team that beat Bowling Green by 7 points, UCLA by 16 points, USC by 3, Minnesota by 1, and lost by 7 to Ohio State and Unhappy Valley could possibly be fourth.
Okay.
So, and I have an open mind.
Similarly to some of the other claims about other teams, primarily in the SEC, that have lost recently and not fallen far, I am going to state to you the counter, which is, who do you place above them?
Who would I place above them? Georgia.
Yes.
I would place Georgia above them. Because I think that Georgia would defeat Penn State. That's why. Because I'm interested in the best teams and ranking the best teams. And record alone is not sufficient. I mean, think about it this way. If someone applied to you for a job and they both had a 3.8 GPA and one of them majored in chemistry and the other one in sociology, is it the same grade point average? Of course not. Record does not account for schedule disparity. And if, as in support of that, you have Boise State at number 11. They're 10-1. They beat Wyoming by 4, Nevada by 7, and were tied with San Jose State at the half. Yet Notre Dame is 10-1, and they lost to Northern Illinois. So why is Boise State lower than Notre Dame? What's the rationale? I think the rationale would be that Notre Dame is playing better competition and probably has a more talented roster. Well, why don't we apply that logic to the rankings? Because these rankings have no credibility. You have Boise State at number 11 and South Carolina out. You have Notre Dame over Boise State. And the reason Notre Dame's over Boise State is because the committee thinks that Notre Dame's a better team, yet they won't apply that same logic, okay, to Penn State, to Indiana, okay? So they're being selective in their logic, and that is the problem. And Mark, I think ultimately that my argument just reflects the fact that I think the 12-team playoff is ridiculous, because we have to get into this nonsense about who 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 should be when none of them really have a realistic chance of winning it. So what are your thoughts? Am I way off here in my concerns, or are they inconsistent with what you would consider fair or just?
I don't want to select a playoff field based on who I think are going to win football games. I don't want to impose that on anyone. I would not want somebody to come to me and say, Mark, we are making you the czar of college football. And that would be a great position to be, because I would use that power to more fairly determine these things. But I wouldn't impose my will or my thoughts on who I think would win football games. That's not how I believe we should be choosing these teams. I actually think we should be choosing them completely objectively. I would impose a system that was completely objective.
Well, then by that logic, neither should the committee. Then there should be some independent metric, because if you don't think you can impose your views, which I think are very smart and well-informed, then why should the committee? What makes them superior? Because if you look at last week's rankings, let's look at last week's rankings compared to this week's rankings and the arguments people made for those rankings. The rankings are different this week because Alabama and Ole Miss, among others, lost to unranked teams that the committee would never consider putting in the playoff. And that is my point, that these rankings prove nothing about who the best team is, because we're ranking too many teams. We need to be ranking 4 teams and having a play-in for the number 4 spot. Otherwise, Last week, how many people said, "Oh, Miss and Alabama, oh, they're going to be in the playoff," and then they lose to unranked teams, and they would have said those teams should have never even been considered for the playoffs, but they lost. So my point is, these rankings are BS in a nutshell, and South Carolina should be in. But I see you have other callers, and I don't want to take any more time.
Well, Adam, if we had a 4-team playoff, who would be in this playoff as the season stands right now for you?
Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and then for the play-in game, I would probably have, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, I'd probably have Georgia and Penn State or Georgia and Notre Dame.
Okay. All right.
But let's revise it and say maybe it should be an 8-team playoff. Because I mean, my point is that you have teams in here like Boise State, SMU, Indiana, Penn State, Miami, Tennessee. The odds of them winning a national championship are close to 0. And we have to engage in all this subjectivity when we're ranking them. And there's too many discrepancies in the schedules, not only with strength, but of results, like what I said to you about Penn State and Boise State. That makes none of this logical, fair, or just. So if you're interested in fairness and justice, we got to cut it down in terms of the number of teams. That's my view, my subjective view, which I don't believe is superior. But
what has resulted from us expanding the playoff field to 12 that's been a positive is, number one, we have more games late in the season of consequence.
It's also more entertaining.
Yes, it's more entertaining. That's another way of saying it's more entertaining. Yes. When we have Texas A&M playing last weekend in a game that was wild back and forth against Auburn, and Texas A&M is 8-2, and this is 2015 or 2020. Well, that Texas A&M team, that's just an entertaining game. It's meaningless. It's worthless because they're out of the playoff chase. But not last weekend. They were in the playoff chase, playing an overtime game with Auburn.
Right, and that's kind of underscores the problem that I see with these rankings, because you have such inconsistencies and results in such chaos, such that Alabama and Ole Miss are considered national championship contenders one week and not the next. So give me a break. Ultimately, you have to decide who the best team is based on their talent and recognizing their schedule disparity. And for those in the chat who have this almost religious objection to putting a 3-loss team in, I would ask you, why are you comfortable putting a 2-loss in when there is such schedule disparity? Do you think Boise State would have 1 loss if they were in the SEC or the Big Ten? Do you think the Big Ten champion would have 1 loss if they played in the Big Ten or the SEC, Big 12? Give me a break. But it's a never-ending debate that, I'm just giving you my opinion, and I thank you for listening to it.
Of course, Adam, and we will have another collection of games to review over the weekend and apply to these rankings, and there will undoubtedly be a surprise or two for us to try to soak in and absorb and process.
All right. Thanks for taking my call, Mark. I appreciate it. Great show.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. Let's take 2 more calls here. We've got Michigan Man lined up. Michigan Man, appreciate you being here. What's up?
What's up, man? Correct me if I'm wrong, man. Maybe my memory's going crazy, but didn't Alabama need a defensive stop to beat Arkansas?
Alabama did not play Arkansas this year.
Or is it South Carolina I'm thinking of?
South Carolina. Yes.
Okay. Did they not need a defensive stop to beat South Carolina?
Yes.
Okay. Did they not score 3 points against a team that needed bowl eligibility in the second to last week of the season and lose by 3 scores?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And I'm supposed to believe this insane tape that Darrell had that somehow if Indiana goes 11-1, that there's an scenario where Alabama could be put ahead of them? That might be one of the worst takes I've ever heard in my life. I'm just being honest.
Yeah, well, I would have to admit I am right there with you. I didn't know exactly how he was taking that stretch. And he wasn't, let's be clear, he wasn't saying that he would make that decision. He's saying that the committee would. But if we look at these rankings and we see Indiana's at 10 and Alabama's at 13, and under his scenario, Indiana barely beats Purdue. And I know Purdue's awful, they're terrible and all that business, but Indiana did win the game under this scenario. So they're 11-1, and Alabama's going to jump 4 spots by beating Auburn, who's 5-6. It's not like Alabama's got the opportunity to play the number 1 team in the country and take them down and leap. They're playing a pretty bad Auburn team. No, the committee's not going to do that. And again, if they did that, I would go just ballistic.
Yeah, it's why it's an absurd take, because you have to make the incredible leap that the committee's going to do something that's quite frankly insane.
Yeah.
So yeah, and you know what's interesting about these rankings is I don't know if this is correct or not, but don't the Power Four conference winners, don't they automatically get the top 4 seeds?
No.
Oh.
Nope, they have to be
I thought that's
ranked.
how it worked.
The top 4 ranked. The top 4 conferences. Let me back this up. The top 5 conferences make the field. The top 5 conference champions are just guaranteed that they will be in the playoff. The top 4 are guaranteed the buys.
Okay, that makes more sense. Okay,
But they don't have to be in the Power 4.
Okay, that makes more sense. You know what's interesting too is if this was, you know, any of the prior to obviously this season, the SEC's missing the playoffs. If this was any other year,
well,
I know Texas is now in the SEC because they've been added. But if this was, you know, any of the previous years, then this would have occurred. The SEC would have missed the playoffs, which is crazy to think about.
Well, you're talking about if this was like 2021, let's say.
Yeah, exactly.
Then it's Oregon out of the Pac-12, Ohio State in the Big Ten, Texas in the Big 12, and Penn State out of the Big Ten.
Yeah, and let me see if you agree with this. I think this is Ryan Day's best chance to win a national title, and it's not because this is his best team. I would actually argue this is his 4th or 5th best team. I think the 2018, 2019 team, the 2019-2020 team, and the 22 team are better than this year's team, but it's more because the competition is not where it's been. Do you agree with that?
Well, you threw in an Urban Meyer team.
Did I? 2018, 2019?
2018.
Oh, you're right.
That was Urban Meyer. So, yeah.
I meant 2019, 20.
Yeah.
The two Justin Fields teams.
Yes. The 2 Justin Fields teams.
Yeah, I would argue those 2 teams and the 22 team with C.J. Stroud were his 3 best teams. But I just think it's because this is, and I've had this opinion all year. I think those are his best teams. I mean, look, why do you think this team is better than those teams?
I think the 2019 team is his best team. Now, we got to see this team play. Let's see him play Oregon again. Let's see him play a playoff game. But at this point, I think 2019 with that bunch, J.K. Dobbins and Garrett Wilson, et cetera, Jeffrey Okudah, that bunch with Chase Young, yes, that's his best.
I mean, 2020 was blowing out everybody too, except for Bama.
Well, 2020, and I have difficulty judging that team just because they played 5 games before they went to the Big Ten championship game. And they did blow out Clemson by 3 touchdowns and had them by 4 touchdowns.
Oh, they did blow out Clemson.
And then by the time they got to the championship game, they were so struck with COVID. They had linebackers covering Devontae Smith. So they were a mess on defense by the time we got there, and they lost their best. They lost Trey Sermon on the first play of the game. So yeah, they might have been able to play. They should have played Bama a lot better.
I just don't see those teams, for example, only winning by 7 versus Nebraska. I don't see those teams
Sure.
being in tight
Sure.
first halves
Yeah.
for a bunch of games. And I that's just my opinion. Even I think 2022. Yeah, I mean that's how I feel. But the main reason. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. This team defensively, though.
Oh, it is a great defensive team. It is. I still have the opinion, and this is just my opinion, that last year's Ohio State defense was slightly better.
Really?
That's just my That's because when I look at a defense, I look at stats too, but I look at how dominant they are, and this defense is very dominant. Don't get me wrong, but last year's defense, I just thought it was more dominant, and I think it's just because competition. I think the competition was better too, though. But it's still great. It's still the best. It's the best defense this year. You know what I'm saying? But you got to say in relative to what? Like Georgia's defense isn't as elite as it usually. It's not even close, actually, as elite as it's been. Michigan's defense isn't as elite as it's been. Alabama's defense isn't as elite as. I mean, all the defenses that typically are staples that you are saying, man, they could be in the competition to be super elite. They're just not. They're just not that this year. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I agree.
And what a difference Nick Saban not coaching is, huh? I don't think it's players leaving the transfer portal for Alabama. I think it's just the coaching change. I think it's just Nick Saban's not there.
Well, you've got the evidence on your side. I think it's more nuanced than that, but certainly the evidence is on your side that Alabama's having its worst season. This would be the worst Nick Saban year. So
the defense is just it doesn't even resemble any Nick Saban defense. I mean, they're getting torched in some of these games. It's crazy. And that's why
torched on defense, are they? Georgia torched them in the second half.
Vanderbilt.
I guess Vanderbilt did.
When I say torch, I don't mean like just through the air. I'm just talking about they're getting moved on a lot. In some of these, I think when you give up, I know it's just 23 points, but Nick Saban ain't giving up 23 points to Oklahoma. That Oklahoma team. I don't believe that's happening.
Well, wait a minute. That team basically had 2 pick sixes.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. I guess that's true. But yeah, I guess that's true. But so this weekend, man, we got the Michigan Ohio State game. I think Michigan's going to get whooped. I've already conceded that. I don't see a scenario where Michigan wins this game. I'm sure you agree, Mark.
I do.
I
think when you can run the ball as well as they can, we know that Donovan Edwards has a track record against this team, and you've got Khalil Mullins, who runs as hard as anybody out there, and a defensive front. Ohio State's got an offensive line that has lost its 2 best offensive linemen. And even though they've made up very well for that by adjusting, if you've got a dominant defensive line performance out of Michigan that mucks up this game, and Donovan Edwards and makes a few special plays, and Khalil Mullins has a 22 carry, 105-yard gain, just grinds it out and keeps the ball. No, I'm not conceding that Ohio State's going to romp. They're by far the better team, and they should.
Yeah, win. I agree.
And the line's too high, but it's not too crazy high. I think it should be more like 13 or 14. But
so here's my hot take, man. I think if they play Edwards in the first half like they've been stubbornly doing, I think we get blown out. Because and that's just my opinion. He has been such a disappointment this year. And look, can we just hope and pray that he breaks off one of those, big game runs that he's broken off before? I guess, but to be honest with you, I don't think our offensive line is going to be able to do that versus this Ohio State defense this year. I just don't see it. And he's also been fumbling. Like he's had 3 or 4 fumbles this year in crucial moments. I just think if they play him, man, I think they're gonna get smoked regardless. But I think it'd be more if they want any chance, they have to start Rod Mullings. But even then, I don't see it, Mark. I don't see it. I know you're trying to balance the line there, but it's too many huge leaps you got to take to even think Michigan has a chance. You know what I'm saying?
I hear what you're saying, but again, I think that Ohio State might. There's a possibility that they start to white knuckle this game if it's 10-6 in the third quarter, and I do think that it's going to be rather cold outside, and people. I don't want taking this to the bank like I'm making a prediction here. I'm not making a prediction. I'm talking about worst case scenario for Ohio State, that Michigan controls the game with a running game and with a defensive line that pressures Howard and stops the run.
Yeah, so see, here's my thing though, man. And I've said this on the Michigan channel. I think this Ohio State offense is actually, it's weird to say because I was just talking about the 22 team, but as a Michigan fan, I think this offense is actually scarier. And it's not because they're more explosive. It's because they're more multiple. They can do more things. You know what I'm saying? Their run game's more, there's more layers to their run game. The QB run, they got different more run schemes than they used to have. They do more screen game. They do a lot more motions. It's not just drop back pass and let's run an outside zone. So I don't know. It's tough for me. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you're hitting on two things here, and they play into exactly my analysis when Will Howard was signed. That Will Howard better be better than Kyle McCord because he had 2.5 years starting in the Big 12, and Kyle McCord had 0 starts. Well, 1 against Akron, but basically 0 starts when last season started. So, and we've seen it play out this year. Will Howard has made far fewer mistakes than Kyle McCord. Far fewer mistakes, both interception mistakes, but he has also not missed as many guys. And when I say miss, I don't mean by not throwing the ball well, because McCord can throw the ball, but he hasn't missed as many receivers. He has seen the guys that have been open, and McCord didn't always see that. And then he can run the ball. Yes. So those two components to Will Howard's game over Kyle McCord has made the offense function more consistently.
I agree with that to an extent, but it's not necessarily it is the quarterback, but it's also to me a totally different offense than what Ryan Day was running the previous 3 years.
Oh, sure.
The routes are different. It's actually it's a lot more short game. It's not as much just chuck it deep, outside corners, deep posts. It's more take advantage of the short passes. It's a lot more Urban-esque. It's a lot more Urban Meyer offense-esque. It's still got the Ryan Day elements, but it's a lot more get the ball to a receiver in a short route and let him do what he needs to do in space, and then play off the run game. And to me, that's a much more scary offense to play, because we had the previous version of his offense, frankly, figured out. This offense, they can do so many different things. I just don't think that I don't think they're going to be able to. I don't think they're going to be able to withstand it, man. That's just my opinion.
Most likely. All right, Michigan man. Anything else?
No. I think I'll say this is the last thing I'll say. If Ohio State does lose the game this year, man, Ryan Day's in trouble, because that recruiting pipelines is coming to Michigan. Talent ain't going to be an issue in the future.
Yeah,
so
that's what
he needs to win. This is a must-win, man.
I need to see this actually happen. I need to see that the players actually come, actually sign, and then actually play. So we'll see.
I agree, but the money, look, no one's going to be able to compete with the NIL that we got now. That's all I'm saying.
We'll see.
It's out of this world. So, all right, man. Well, go blue. We'll get you back next year, because I don't think we're going to win this year, but we'll get you next year. All right.
All right.
Peace out.
Thanks, man. All right. Michigan's still trying to catch up with Ohio State. I know. I had a great conversation with Steve Dace. Check that out. We're going to take 2 more calls here. But Steve Dace and myself talking to Ohio State, Michigan. Yes, it was a friendly conversation. We didn't debate because what's there to debate? Ohio State's a far superior team this year. Steve doesn't give Michigan any chance. I give, well, actually, as it turned out, Steve Dace said 20% chance. And I said, yeah, that's where I'm at. That's a better than a puncher's chance that Michigan can win that game. But great conversation with Steve Dace. Check it out. And again, I hold and will have a debate with anyone, and most likely this person would be wearing maize and blue, that if you compare the 2 programs historically, meaning from the Stone Age, from the beginning of time, yes, it's extremely debatable. It is so razor close when you add up all the championships, the winning percentage, and all the accolades and all the bowl games. If you add all that up from the beginning of time, yes. But if you're actually talking about what resembles football, like real football, like throwing the ball, like legal forward passes, 1914, and then certainly if you go past World War II, it's not debatable. It's not debatable who has an all-time better program. It's not debatable. Ohio State has Michigan in every conceivable category. It's not close. It's not debatable, but I will debate it with anyone who wants to have that debate. We have the entire offseason for us to have that debate. And for me to say that Ohio State's got a better winning percentage, they've won more bowl games, won more major bowl games, they have won more national titles, more conference championships while they've been in the Big Ten. They have produced more All-Americans. They have produced more NFL players, more first-round picks. It's just not debatable. All right. We'll take our final 2. We've got Andrew on the line. Andrew, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going, Mark?
Good. How are you? First-time caller?
Good. What is it?
First-time caller?
No, actually, I called a couple years ago. It was just very brief.
Nice.
But I wanted to respond to a caller who called a couple callers back. He was talking about how something with Georgia and Alabama being ranked above Indiana.
Yes.
My whole thing is I want to take it back to what the president of the College Football Playoff Committee said at the very beginning of the year. He said, we are looking to put the 12 best teams. And he used the word best. And I really, I hate when people use the term best teams. I want to put the best teams in there because logically, if we think about it, who are the best teams right now? Well, among many others, there's Florida and there's South Carolina and there's Kansas. They're not the best teams, but they're right on the fringe of where you would call maybe in your power rankings top 12 teams in the country. And so if you want to use that logic, we're gonna have to kick out Boise State if they have a poor performance against San Jose State, and input Florida because they just beat Ole Miss and LSU. So when we're looking at it from the perspective of best teams, I think it's fallacious. I think what we need to be focusing on is the most deserving teams. Now that doesn't mean that an undefeated team is always ranked higher than a 1-loss or a 2-loss team, though ordinarily I think that is the case. There's certainly exceptions with like the non-Power 5 teams versus an SEC team, for example, but we need to really start focusing on who is the most deserving team rather than who is the best team.
Well, I totally agree with you that, first of all, the term best is beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. Nobody knows who the best teams are. We can pretend to know. People can say they know. They don't know. I don't know. Nobody knows who the best teams are. We know collectively who the best if any reasonable college football fan was asked who are the 12 best teams in the country, and then we were all polled, and we would be very close on those 12. Now, what order they should be in? Yeah. Again, there would be about 20 teams in the running for those 12 spots, and how to order them would be all over the place if we were simply asking people who are the 12 best teams and order them correctly. So I don't like that either. That's why we play games, and that's why we evaluate results, is to determine who earned this, who earned a playoff spot. Now, you bring up an interesting point about recency. So are we selecting? Now, every time I propose this, then it sounds ridiculous to people. But for those people that want the hottest teams to be in the field, meaning the best teams right now, then yeah, that could be South Carolina. That could be Florida. That could be Kansas. Trying to think of any other examples out there. Certainly those three. But does that mean we wait the game? Then if we are not selecting the teams with the best seasons, the best resume for an entire season, and we're just selecting teams that are the hottest at the end of the year because we want the best teams that are playing the best at the end of the year, then we need to implement a metric that weights the games. And if we did that fairly, then if the last game of the season was a full game, then the second to last game would be worth 11/12ths of a game, and the third to last game would be worth 10/12ths of a game, and you would go all the way back to the first game of the season that would only be worth 1/12 of a game. And that sounds ridiculous, but that seems like a valid metric if you want to rate or determine the hottest teams in the country and who's playing the best right now, and weight the games throughout the season.
Yeah, and to take that even one step further, when we're looking at scores of games as well, this team beat this team 24-7, but it was a lot closer than the score indicated. We also need to look at, well, the objective of the game is to score more points. And so no matter how close it actually looked on paper, and maybe I'm taking a more extreme view than you, Mark, but no matter how close it looks on paper, I'm sorry, no matter how close it looked in person watching the game, if the score indicates that it was a blowout, then it should be treated as such, right? Because the objective of the game is to score more points, and whether or not that's something that was, you got lucky, you got some bad calls, like Alabama and Oklahoma. It should have, the final score should have been 24-10. I mean, there should no question that was the worst call I've ever seen in my life. The receiver was covered up, but
yes,
but
I said the same thing. I tweeted that out. This is the worst call I've ever seen.
yeah, but furthermore, even looking at the individual scores of games and the margin of victory, I don't know. I guess maybe that's a tangential point. What are your, maybe to switch topics, what are your thoughts on the Michigan versus Ohio State in, the line play and how the interior linemen are going to match up? Do you think Ohio State is maybe going to get over that hump against Michigan, or do you think Michigan's talent is decreased?
Yes, I think Michigan does not have the same offensive line or defensive front that they had last year, but I still believe that they have one of the better defensive fronts in the country. But last year they had the best defensive front in the country, and I think that that is the number one point of their primary chance to pull off an upset, is that they have a defensive line that is capable of wrecking Ohio State's game plan, much like Nebraska did a few weeks ago out of Ohio State's complete incompetence up front that game. Now, Ohio State just was responding to immediate injuries and has adjusted extremely well since then, but they've lost one of the best centers in the country since then. and Michigan may be able to really do some damage.
Exploit that freeze point, as Josh Pate likes to say. Maybe it seems like we should blow out Michigan, but if we're not able to control the line of scrimmage, what happened versus Nebraska is going to happen again. Or potentially we could be on the wrong side of that. So yeah, that's a good point. Anyways, that's all I wanted to talk about, was mainly the just the flawed perception a lot of people have. And I mean, I'm not perfect at all. I've never claimed to be, but
Well, none of us have the perfect, perspective on any of this at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
I'll let you get back to it, and thanks for talking to me.
Awesome. Thanks for calling the show, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Yep.
All right. Looks like
Yeah.
Dr. Buckeye is going to wrap it up for us here.
Wrapping it up with Mark Rogers. Good to see. First of all, I find it encouraging that you are trying to give the Scum fans some hope this weekend, Mark. I think that's awfully kind of you for trying to throw a bone to them this weekend and offer some hope, which I think is very nice of you.
You think that's what I'm doing, huh?
Well, first of all, you're trying to keep an air of objectivity. You run the show. I get it. I get it, Mark. I get it. I was a little disappointed you didn't wear the Art Schlichter jersey on the Day show this week, but I
thought about.
I digress.
Sorry to cut you off. So we record the Michigan podcast on Tuesday afternoons. So it was kind of odd today because I just got done talking to him about 45 minutes earlier on his show, and then had him turn around to do that live stream, and that went through my mind, and I went for a little walk around the neighborhood. Then that completely, I'm at the age where I guess I get distracted easily, so that was completely in and out of my mind within 13 seconds. So
come on. Yeah, I mean, hey, Mark, you're staying in good shape. It still probably fits. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, if a football jersey doesn't fit, then we're in trouble.
Larger problems. All right. I caught a little bit of your conversation with him. Did you? I just saw the tail end of it. Did you broach the Bryce Underwood subject with him? Maybe you did that more on his show this week. And I guess my question is, too bad for me, I didn't get a chance to call into the Team Up North show. But I guess my larger question would be, is he of the point that this is just about them buying a player? And number one, and point number two, what type of development does he expect to get there, considering this has not been a program that's really ever built a high-level passing game in the past? I know J.J. McCarthy was efficient last year, but I'm talking about, a high-level passing game, where, it's down the field and really pushing the ball down the field and generating chunk plays. I mean, kind of both of those parts, Mark, did you kind of address that with him, and what was his thoughts on that?
We did not talk about it today, although, so during his Michigan podcast, I believe he records a segment that I don't see. And I think that was his topic. But in hearing from him both today, in amongst him groveling about not having a chance on Saturday, that it's all about the future, and Michigan fans will basically not even care what the final score is, even if it's 100-0. Ryan Day, go have a good time, because that's going to be it for you.
Right.
So hang 100 this year. That's the end of existence at Ohio State, because we've got so much money, and it's just going to be flooding in and pouring in by the droves, and we've got so many billionaires backing us that this thing's over. So that's kind of what I gathered from both he and our Michigan guys, that they're just giddy about how much money they're going to have to spend on not just Bryce Underwood, but all sorts of talent. Anyone that they could ever desire will be coming to Ann Arbor, and basically that we should be signaling the end of college football as we know it, that they're going to run off. They're going to be running off national championships like it's 1901.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to party like it's 1901, 1902 again. Okay. And then they'll just buy the players, and that's their path.
Yeah.
We'll just buy a bunch of players. Okay. Okay. I mean, first of all, just because you buy the players, go ask Texas A&M how that worked out for them. I mean, you can buy the wrong players and it can blow up in your face. I mean, that's a thing that happens. Listen, you see it in baseball all the time. I mean, I'm a little bit partial to the New York Mets. It's kind of my second favorite baseball team.
Yeah.
I've watched them spend bad money on top of bad money for like 100 years. They still have a day called Bobby Bonilla Day there, where they spend, they talk about the fact that they wasted a ton of money on a player. So this whole we'll just go out and buy players, I'd be a little bit leery about that. And that's the end of the subject. And by the way, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't he a guy that wanted to fire his OC? And am I also not right? When was the last time they developed a high level passing game? I mean, aren't both of those things true?
The last time, and I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, that I really felt as though Michigan had a high level passing game would be in the days of Chad Henne,
Right.
where they really threw the ball downfield, and he had obviously a great arm, but
Right.
that would be it there. Now, obviously, those are two completely different programs. There's no connectivity between what was going on then and what's going on now.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
that can change. You can certainly go out and hire someone who can develop quarterbacks and develop offenses and game plan.
Yeah. Hopefully for them. Well, they did try to put their hand on this stove once in hiring Josh Gaddis and going with that speed and space with that runt quarterback Shea Patterson in 2019, and that did not work out too well for them. So
I think Michigan football is going to continue to be what it's been in regards to the emphasis on power running game, and that the passing game is going to be secondary. They want it to be viable, but want it to be secondary. Let's not forget places like Ole Miss that we consider to be, people that don't necessarily watch Ole Miss play consider. Now, this year might be a little bit different because they had all sorts of issues. And actually, we were talking about that on our Ole Miss show with their running back core. And they've got some kind of controversy with their most talented running back who's not playing because of who knows why. But where Ole Miss, you think of Ole Miss, you think Lane Kiffin, and of course, Jeff Lebby was just there, that they have just these prolific passing seasons and statistics, but they're top 2 or 3 in the SEC in rushing every year. So I guess I think we sometimes get that mixed up. Josh Heupel,
right,
runs the ball.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. I mean, it's not always the quarterback is going to just build up, again, a high level passing game. I get your point. And Harbaugh was smart to go back to his roots and play ground and pound. I think that was a good strategy on his part. I think he was allowed to fail with Gaddis. So, he was able to go back and do that. I did want to comment on the rankings because that's what the show's about, Mark. Couple of thoughts. By the way, I've mentioned the Notre Dame being ranked higher than Penn State. Does that, I don't know, do you think that 6 1/2 dozen of the other, or does that irk you at all? Or
why should it irk me? They should be ranked lower than Penn State.
Okay, so I mean, do you think that the Texas A&M, Army, and Louisville victories are better than beating Illinois, Minnesota, and who's the third best victory or second best victory for Penn State?
So who did you just name? Texas A&M, they're 8-3.
Right.
Okay. Let's take Illinois at 8-3 in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
I mean, would you consider a depleted SEC?
Well, I agree, but I do think Texas A&M would beat Illinois on a neutral field, in my opinion.
But those wins are pretty much on the same plane, right?
Well, I just said I would take Texas A&M over Illinois on a neutral field, and Notre Dame did have to beat them at Texas A&M.
Okay. All right.
Just a thought. I mean, I'm just,
very, very slightly better win. Okay. And then after that, we've got Louisville, who's 7-4. Okay. And what do we've got for Penn State? We
Minnesota.
We got a Minnesota. I definitely think Minnesota's in the Louisville League, if not better.
That's close.
I would actually say, I know Minnesota's got one less win, but man, I think Minnesota's played better than Louisville. It's close. It's close.
Okay.
Okay. Then we're going with Army.
I was trying to think, is that what do we got? Third best win for Penn State? Washington, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah. So we got a 6-5 Big Ten team against Army. I know I'm taking Washington.
Okay.
But yeah, I guess that sizes up the top 3 wins. Well, I think that's a toss-up.
Okay. And because, Penn State's loss wasn't as bad as Notre Dame's loss.
That's where we're headed.
Okay.
There's no comparison between those 2 losses.
Okay.
Yeah, I got into this argument a couple weekends ago with our guy Brian Driscoll from Irish Breakdown, and I just don't. Yeah, and if anything, Penn State's resume has just gotten stronger, and Notre Dame's has gotten worse since then.
Well, I will say the Illinois win is aging a little bit better for Penn State than I thought it might. I do have to say that. Although I thought Rutgers kind of blew that game against Illinois last week.
Yeah.
They did.
I thought Illinois was going to take care of them a little bit more handily.
Yeah, that's true. All right, I may be with you on that. I was just thinking about it. Maybe with the Illinois win aging a little bit better, that does help the Penn State cause. To the SEC, is it for sure Georgia gets in even if they lose the SEC title game?
Yes.
Okay.
They're in.
Okay. So the fact that they got to the Georgia Dome, even if they lose to Texas, because the only thing I was thinking is if they go 10-3 and Ole Miss goes 10-2, you do have a head-to-head factor if that was like a thing.
Yeah, you do. But Georgia's either going to go 10-3 or 11-2. So what you're telling us, there's not a direct comparison record-wise, but
no. What I was saying is if I'm not saying it would come down to one of those teams in, one of those teams out. That was my only line of thinking. If Georgia goes 10-3, Ole Miss goes 10-2, and Ole Miss is obviously going to say we've got the head-to-head. We clearly beat them and beat them badly. That. Like I said, well, I'm trying to think of it right now because if you have the 4 Big Ten teams, and then you have Texas, let's say, that wins it. See, I think that if Georgia loses, how much does that open up the door again for either an Alabama or an Ole Miss?
So Georgia loses the SEC championship game.
Right.
I think they're going to have to lose it decidedly.
Okay.
For them to entertain. If they walk off the field and they lose to Texas, whom they have already beaten, they lose a rematch 30-27 to the number 3 team in the country. That's not going to hurt them at all.
Okay. So bottom line, if Georgia loses to Texas, how many SEC teams get in? Just 3?
Georgia loses to Texas. Those 2 make it. Tennessee makes it. Yeah. So we've got 4 from the Big Ten.
Right.
1 minimum from the ACC is 5.
Right.
Big 12, 6. Group of 5, 7. Notre Dame, 8. So that leaves us with 4.
Right.
So that's either going to be 4 from the SEC or that's going to be another spot taken up with Clemson or SMU jumping in.
Yeah, the one thing that would be interesting is if SMU gets beaten that title game by either Clemson or Miami.
Yes.
You do think that there's a path for SMU to get in if they lose that title game over that 3-loss SEC team? Is your viewpoint?
I think that if we're talking about knocking SEC teams out, then the best way for that to happen is for SMU to beat Miami. if Miami wins this weekend against Syracuse,
Yeah.
they're going to hold firm at 6. And then SMU does the same thing. You're going to have a 6 versus 9 matchup. So you want 9 to beat 6 because that strengthens 9 and that slightly weakens 6. And Miami still makes the playoffs because they're not going to plummet. Losing to the 9th ranked team in the country, if they lose by a field goal, they're not going to fall from 6 to 13. So they would both make it. Plus, you've got, my goodness, if Clemson, they're sitting there at 12. So they are in the playoff right now.
Yeah, but you already picked it, Mark. You got them out. You already picked it. You already gave me your hand last weekend. You already said you're picking South Carolina to win that game.
I think South Carolina is a better team. But if they win, if Clemson wins, they're a slight favorite at home. They win this game, they're 10-2, and they just beat a really good team that's ranked number 15 in the country. So how do they not take 3 teams out of the ACC?
Wow. We're going to live in a world where we could get 3 teams out of the ACC. You could get just as many teams out of the ACC as the SEC.
How do they leave them out?
Yeah.
They can't knock a team, and the strength of these wins that the team. So this is the key in this.
Go ahead.
They showed us a lot. As soon as I saw them unveil Alabama and Ole Miss, and Clemson was still on the table,
right,
waiting to be I thought, really? You've elevated Clemson above Alabama and Ole Miss, or basically you've dropped Alabama and Ole Miss because they lost these games below Clemson, who just beat the Citadel, just because they're 8-3. Really? Well, Clemson is a better resume than Alabama and Ole Miss.
Well,
no,
see,
they don't.
Right. Well, here's the thing. I think it's done this weekend. You already called it. I agree with you on it. South Carolina is going to pace Clemson, I believe. South Carolina.
But if they don't,
okay,
then Clemson, they're in the playoff. You can't knock them out. There's no way.
Alabama, not if they lose the ACC title game. If they lose the ACC title game,
they won't play in the ACC title game. They're safe. They're in the clubhouse. They're done.
That's right. Okay, good. Well, they would get in if Miami loses to Syracuse, though.
Sure, but we're talking about Miami winning, SMU winning.
Right.
They're playing in an ACC championship game, and SMU is the 9th ranked team in the country, beats number 6. They're both going to stay. There's no justifiable way to knock these teams out based on that scenario.
Well, hold on a second. I'm not making and I'm not an SEC fan. I'm far from it. But there is still a very, very plausible way for the SEC to get 4 teams here.
Not based on what I just sized
up. Okay. To me, the answer is simple. South Carolina beats Clemson. Okay. And then SMU beats Miami in the title game. Now the question would be, would you take a 2-loss loser Miami over a 3-loss SEC team like an Alabama, an Ole Miss, or somebody like that?
So I'm not arguing for what I believe is going to happen. I am proposing that the ACC deserves or earns based on the committee's own rankings, not based on my rankings, because I've got Clemson down at like 17 or something. I've got Clemson at their wins are terrible.
Yeah, they're bad.
Clemson 17 in the country. Like, they have not earned their best win is against Pitt. And their second best wins against Virginia. I guess.
Yeah.
5-5 Virginia. I'm mystified by this Clemson ranking. I don't get that at all.
Yeah, I think that's a joke. Well, to me, bottom line, I think it's remedied this weekend. We both pick in South Carolina to beat Clemson. I think that the Fighting Davos get done out this weekend, and the only plausible teams in the ACC that can make it then are either Miami or SMU, possibly both. The question would be, if the loser of the ACC title game, whether it be Miami or SMU, then at that point gets in over a 3-loss SEC team, i.e. Ole Miss or Alabama.
Okay.
Do you think that that's what would be your to that situation? What would be your? Would you take the loser if it's just down to Miami and SMU, and those are the only two teams because Clemson is out because they got 3 losses?
Mm-hmm.
If it's down to the loser of, would you take the loser of Miami or SMU over a 3-loss South Carolina, a 3-loss Alabama, or a 3-loss Ole Miss? I guess it would be a 3-loss Alabama and Ole Miss because they both beat South Carolina.
Yes. So Miami's at 6 and SMU's at 9.
Yeah.
Alabama's all the way down to 13 and Ole Miss is at 14. They get no lift. So we got an ACC champion, and it is better for the ACC to have SMU win this game.
That's right.
Because Miami's obviously 3 spots higher. So
Yeah, that's right.
They've got further to drop. So no, Alabama's not playing a 9-2 Auburn team. They're not. Ole Miss is not playing a good Mississippi State team that's, let's say, 7-4 under Dan Mullen or Mike Leach. They're playing bad football teams. They are not getting resume boosts. They shouldn't be.
Okay.
Based on beating Auburn and especially Mississippi State, who's one of the worst teams in the country. And
Correct.
unfortunately, South Carolina, they're going to get this resume boost, kind of an artificial one, somewhat, but still, it's a good Clemson team. They're a good team. They're one of the 15 to 20 best teams in the country. But South Carolina, unfortunately, gets stuck behind Alabama and Ole Miss. They lose that head-to-head. So they're done.
So, okay. My only thing is if Miami ends up at 11-2, I guess, because if they win this week, they'd be 10-2. And then I'm sorry, would they be 10-2 or I'm sorry, they've only have one loss, right?
Lost one game.
Okay. So yeah, they would be 11-1. They'd be 11-2, even though they don't have a lot of quality victories compared to, let's say, what Ole Miss or Alabama has. If they lose in the title game in the ACC at 11-2, you're still thinking they would get in because they're at the 6th spot, and them losing to SMU at the 9th spot would not drop them down that much.
Well, we're taking Ole Miss and Alabama, and again, every time I make a comment like this, let's understand that we're talking in vacuums, so we're not getting the entire picture of what else is happening. We're just taking, so you can't take this verbatim, but we just saw Alabama lose and drop. They lost to a mediocre team.
Right.
And Ole Miss lost to a mediocre team.
Right.
And then they dropped 6 spots is what they did. One of them dropped 6 and the other dropped 5. And if that happens to Miami and losing to the 9th best team in the country, apparently, well, Alabama lost by 3 touchdowns to a 5-5 team and dropped 6 spots. So Miami's going to drop 6 spots. Even if they do, they'll be in the playoff after losing to the 9th ranked team in the country. So they're in the playoff. They should be based on all logic. They should be in the playoff.
Just getting to the ACC title game with an 11-1 record, even if they lose there, should be enough to get in over a 9-3 SEC team. Even though Miami's best win, if they go 11-2 and lose to SMU in the title game, would be what? I don't know.
Florida.
Yeah, okay. They did beat Florida early in the year and they crushed them.
Who's probably going to be 7-5. We forgot about Georgia Tech on Notre Dame's resume at 7-4 and USC 6-5 on Penn State's resume. If we want to.
Yeah, Penn State. Yeah, Notre Dame would both, and Penn State could both have wins over USC.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to kind of run some of these situations and scenarios by you. I know you're already thinking of them. You're probably going to cut like 85 videos about this stuff or something like that, right?
We'll be somewhere in that range.
Well, you got to keep yourself busy, Mark.
Yeah. There's nothing else keeping me busy. That's for sure.
All right, my friend. Well, hey, you coming back with call-in show after the the Ole Miss and Mississippi State game on Thanksgiving, or
well, they're playing on Friday.
oh, that's I thought that they did that on Turkey Day for
They
some
have
reason.
moved that game off of Thanksgiving.
Yeah, because they'd always done it on Turkey Day.
Yes.
Okay. So
right.
probably see you back on Friday then, huh, Mark?
Yes, sir.
All right, Mark. You have a good night.
Thank you, sir. We'll see you.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
All right. I had said last call, but this is probably the one guy that's going to move me off of saying no more calls. But we'll take one more call because it's Will.
Mark, I'll keep it quick.
You're fine.
If Notre Dame wins by 3 scores against USC, and they compare that to Penn State's performance against USC, do you think the Irish can jump Penn State in the rankings?
Okay. My first question is, why does it matter?
Because they're comparing the head-to-head result.
Well, I know, I get your point, but so if everything stays the way it is right now, Notre Dame is going to be obviously the Ohio State situation is going to take care of itself, and one of them is going to get pushed down to 5, probably, unless something crazy happens. So that would push Notre Dame to 6. And Penn State gets dropped down. So either they're going to be 6 or they're going to be 7.
Well, I would rather play the ACC champion than the SEC champion in that second round.
Okay, 2-7 game versus a 3-6 game. Gotcha.
That's why I think it matters.
Yep. I gotcha. Well, yeah, that's a reasonable argument. So yeah, Notre Dame's best wins are Texas A&M in some order: Texas A&M, Army, Louisville, and Georgia Tech. I don't see really any other Notre Dame win that's worth discussing. No, that's it.
Like, I just feel like on the eye test, like, I think Notre Dame would have won by a convincing margin against Minnesota. But I mean, I know that I'm being a homer there, but I felt like that.
Do we think that Penn State would have won by a more convincing margin than Notre Dame did against Northern Illinois?
Like, I mean, yeah, but like just possible? Doesn't it count like how good you're playing down the stretch? Doesn't that matter at all?
I don't think that committee's ever made that a criteria. We could make that a criteria, but that's never been stated.
I felt like Ohio State they were like, weren't they dominant over Wisconsin in 2014? I mean, don't you think that aided them at all?
Well, sure, but they were making an evaluation of the win.
So then they would make an evaluation. I mean, I was having that part of that to be part of the evaluation of. I mean, I know Minnesota's probably better than Army, but
yeah, they are.
But Notre Dame completely controlled the Army game, and then Penn State had to go for it on 4th fake punt to seal their victory over Minnesota.
And what did somebody tell you in the chat the other night? I think somebody told you that Notre Dame would go 500 in the Big Ten.
No, it was keep chopping.
Our buddy keep chopping, laying down the law.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would hope that they would consider putting Notre Dame over Penn State, but if they don't, then it's really Notre Dame's fault. But
what is West Virginia, 5-6? I think they just lost.
That sounds right.
That's another. No, they're 6-5. So we got on the list for Penn State. All right, there we go. So we got another 6-5. Penn State's got all these 6-5 wins. USC, Washington, Minnesota, West Virginia, and I guess that's it. Yeah. So they're really comparable lists here.
I was trying to. Mark, do you think So you're very up on South Carolina against Clemson. Do you think that Syracuse has a better chance of beating Miami than Clemson does over South Carolina?
Oh, yes. Wait a minute. Do I think Syracuse has a better chance against Miami than Clemson against South Carolina? No.
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 Mm-hmm.
Clemson's the favorite against South Carolina. I just happen to think South Carolina is a better team. They're playing better. They've played much more quality opponents and performed better, but that's still kind of a toss-up game. I'm just sold on South Carolina and the way they're playing right now. But yeah, Syracuse is a decided underdog against Miami, and they should be.
They just need to run the ball.
Syracuse,
but their O line's not good.
That's
the problem.
Touchdown.
Yeah. I just think it would be fun to play Miami at home if Miami dropped down. I mean, I don't know. They could play Notre Dame if SMU beats them, but
Like if we did a comparison on Syracuse and Miami, I have to think even in these ridiculous conferences now that they've played some like opponents. I know Wake would be one that I'm guessing this isn't going to be comparable. So, well, I guess it will be to start out here because we've got Syracuse beat Georgia Tech by a field goal. And of course,
there you go,
Tech beat
Syracuse.
Miami.
Yeah.
And then we've got
the Stanford loss is a black eye.
Yeah.
But I mean,
that's because Fran Brown doesn't know how to coach, apparently. So that's the one game. Then they both played Virginia Tech. So they both beat Virginia Tech very close. And then we've got Cal. They both beat Cal very close. For Miami, even closer than I didn't see this Syracuse Cal game, so I can't really comment on it, but they beat them by a score. So I guess so they've got three common opponents, and they're actually pretty comparable. I was a bit surprised to see that. I thought that Syracuse played Wake, but they did not. Okay. But Syracuse has lost to Stanford. And of course, they just got blown out by Pitt because Kyle McCord had maybe some kind of color blindness that night or something. I don't know what's going on. And then they lost to Boston College, who's pretty marginal. Yeah, that spread's like 10 or 11. But I've been looking at that game for a long time as a possible.
I hope you're right, Michael. Michael here is saying what I'm hoping that
Kyle McCord's going to throw like 55 passes in this game. He's just going to have to sling it.
Mark, I know people are saying that USC is going to be Notre Dame. I can't see USC moving the ball very well.
I don't really either. When I look at their personnel, they should move the ball, but I think they just have too many offensive line issues. And Notre Dame's defensive front should control that game. But if they can't score against, they're barely getting into the 20s against.
The UCLA performance did not impress me at all for them.
No.
And then I feel like the offense has been getting better every week. So, like Riley had probably his best throw of the year to Jaden Harrison on that first Army drive. So, I mean, I know it was against Army, but I felt like that pass would have been completed against anyone.
Yeah, I'm sure that was an NFL corner out there playing for Army.
I know, but it looked like a dime. It looked like a dime.
That guy's going to be in the Middle East here in about 6 months.
Yeah.
So how I probably shouldn't ask this. It would plant a bad seed in your mind. But how disappointed would you be if Notre Dame lost Saturday?
I mean, I already feel like Notre Dame's in the playoff. Like I feel it, so it would be like something I already feel like I already have taken away from me. It would be.
Yeah.
Like I just don't want another 2015 Stanford. Like that was a painful way to lose.
Yeah, that was quite a game.
Yeah.
I don't think. Now, see, talking about teams falling, Notre Dame's at 5.
Mm-hmm.
Would they really fall that far? But
I think they
that
would
be
fall out.
pretty bad loss.
I think they would take Notre Dame out.
Yeah, I think they would too.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be interesting to see India if how Indiana will compete. If that stays the same, Indiana and Penn State, that game would be fascinating. Just because like they've had similar scores against teams, but
yeah, I wouldn't want that matchup just because I want to see teams in different conferences play.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'd have Indiana. So what do we have here? We would have
SMU, Notre Dame, Indiana, Penn State.
Yeah. So we'd have what? Ohio State play Boise State.
Well, they'd give Boise State the bye. They would have Ohio State play Arizona State.
Oh, well that's right.
A rematch of that '97 Rose Bowl, but the Arizona State team wouldn't be able to compete as well as that Jake the Snake team.
And Notre Dame would be in the 7.
7-10 SMU.
Okay.
And then 8-9 is Tennessee and someone else.
Georgia?
I guess so.
Yeah, I don't want to see them play again.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Will. Anything else?
All right. No, I mean, can I plug my show with Jeffrey? We're about to do our show. But if you have another show, then...
Of course you can. Hopefully we get all these people over there.
Yeah, just check out Only Talk Sports or Will and D. We're about to put up our StreamYard and then do our show.
There we go.
Show should be fun.
Only Talk Sports, everyone. You got Jeffrey, you got Will going at it.
Mm-hmm.
More college football playoff discussion.
And we're gonna have an interesting discussion about that Alabama game. He always gets emotional about Alabama and Indiana. So
he gets emotional.
Well, not emotional. He gets passionate about his team. Yeah, I'll say that, passionate.
All right. What's there to get riled up about that game? They just
he blames it on the players, but I'm like, Kalen DeBoer should be the one that to have them ready.
Yeah.
I mean, the players have something to blame, but yeah.
I piled on Jalen Milroe for that pathetic attempt of a tackle on that pick six.
Mm-hmm.
That was terrible.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Will. Have a good night. All right, folks. Appreciate you being here. And if you enjoy college football, I think all of you enjoy college football. I'm just taking a guess. I just have a feeling you all love college football. That's just a guess. Disputed National Champions. Give it a read. Give it a look. I am almost positive you will love it. It's a historical look at the 1990s, but it's much, much more than a history book. It's not a history book, really. It's more about the future. So it's a good mixture of both. We really dissect every season of the 1990s, which I consider to be the most impactful. That's the reason I chose the 1990s. Although if this book sells, I would love to write one on every decade. But we chose the 1990s to start out. And again, the link is in the description section of this video. So give it a look. It's $9.99. Disputed National Champions, or just go to Amazon and put in Disputed National Champions, and you should be able to find this book, and we appreciate it. And maybe I should mention this, since we've had about 20 people request this, and it's very nice of them to ask about a signature. So I guess I could collect everybody who would like a signed copy, and then I would just say I had to order all those and then send them out, is the only way I can figure out to do that. But again, Disputed National Champions, the link's in the description section down below. Or you can just go on Amazon and search for it. We've got an Ole Miss channel that we would love to get to 1,000 subs. So please, we are really pushing the Ole Miss channel. We've got a show every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And we got Leanne, we got Ruby, we got myself doing the Ole Miss show, and we do the Ole Miss post game. We got an Ole Miss channel. So please subscribe to the Ole Miss channel right here at the Voice of College Football. Wow. Next show, Ohio State Live. I think they've got a big game this week, from what I understand. I'll have to double check to see who they're playing this week, but Ohio State's got a big game. So we will talk about that on Buckeyes Live at 11 a.m. Eastern time on Wednesday. As far as my duties on Wednesday, we got Ohio State Live at 11, Florida State at 6, Miami at 7. And we're still trying to fit in the Iowa show with Corey Bratta. So we'll figure out when to do that. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We will see you bright and early at 11 a.m. Eastern Time with the Buckeye Show.